It's rival school,
That's why I
as
said.
you know.
That's why I said.
Yeah, we're all set.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the City of Delray Beach's budget workshop meeting scheduled for 3 p.m. on Tuesday, July 11th, 2023. Please call the roll.
Mr. Frankel.
Present.
Mr. Long.
Present.
Ms. Burns.
Here.
Mayor Petrolia.
And I'm here, and we're going to start with Mr. Moore.
Hold on one second. Do we need a motion to allow Mr. Kiwi to appear?
Is he on?
He's
Is he
on,
on? Oh, I didn't
Okay.
see that he was on. Yeah, so we
There
would
he
need a
is.
motion to allow, there he is, Vice Mayor Boylston to appear virtually.
Kiwi Ryan, Mr. 250, F45.
We need a
to
motion,
appear.
thank you.
I need a second.
Second.
Call the roll.
And don't include Commissioner Boylston in the roll.
Mr. Long.
Yes.
Mr. Boylston.
He
I
doesn't
don't
vote.
Ms. Burns.
Yes.
Mayor Petrolia.
Yes.
Mr. Frankel.
Yes.
All right, so
Thank you.
welcome. All right, Mr. Moore.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello. We hear you all the way across the other side of the world.
All right. Hello, Mr. Boylston, Vice Mayor Boylston. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and I just wish to offer a few introductory comments relative to the fiscal year 2023-2024 proposed budget process. And much direction being offered to this effect takes under consideration much of the robust discussion we had during the June 13th engagement with the City Commission relative to input pertaining to positions, as well as notably the fund balance piece. And we are pleased to report, the Office of the City Manager is pleased to report a recommended millage rate of 6.3611, consistent with the direction or interest in making a reduction by 0.15 mils from that of the current millage rate for fiscal year 2022-2023. Total city operating funds anticipated at $329,817,916, of which $184,319,165 is general fund. The rest, of course, encompassing special revenue funds, enterprise fund, debt service fund, and internal service funds. In addition to Director of Finance or Chief Financial Officer Hugh Dunkley offering a presentation to offer some specifics in that regard, there will be the opportunity to learn more about the capital improvement program, as this is a annual exercise to be adjusted every 5 years or so, and Director of Public Works Missy Barletto is in position to assist us in that realm. There's also an opportunity to receive additional clarity relative to the Urban Development Action Grant Program, and that during the June 13th engagement, we talked a little bit about different ideas and strategies as to what is possible, and the commitment was likewise made to follow up with the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development to outline what our capabilities are and are not to mention a couple ancillary ideas to that effect as well. Finally, there will be an opportunity for a commentary from the Downtown Development Authority with respect to the opportunity pertaining to its operation. As it is a separate authority, it has its own structured millage rate, and the opportunity for engagement and consideration to be made available accordingly as well. The budget does take under consideration some expanded level of service, including several new positions in the general fund, some of which we discussed during the June 13th engagement relative to police, but of course there are some opportunities in Parks and Recreation, Fire, the Office of the City Attorney, and one in the Office of the City Manager, notably a Director of Special Events capacity. Given the level of activity functions externally, there is some merit and consideration to get to that place, and that is being incorporated as well. As far as some of the other funds, many of which benefit the Department of Development Services, notably the Building Fund, and of course there's some capacity for stormwater, sanitation, neighborhood services, and information technology. So with that, we've done, I think, what is considered to be an excellent job in terms of offering a balanced budget recommendation to incorporate expanded level of service given the interest expressed by the City Commission, as well as an overall evaluation of operational needs throughout all departments. And it's fantastic to be able to deliver this via a recommended reduction of the millage rate down to 6.3611 mils, consistent with interests having been expressed by the City Commission. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we will formally highly recommend approval as noted. However, at this time, I would like to introduce Chief Financial Officer Hugh Dunkley, who will offer some ancillary comments to support the general overview I've just provided, followed by a commentary from Director of Public Works Missy Barletto regarding capital improvement program considerations, followed by Director of Neighborhood and Community Services Sam Walthour and his team concerning the Urban Development Action Grant Program. Mr. Dunkley, if you would, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor, members of the City Commission. Actually, just want to redirect the PowerPoint presentation to the other one. It's the bear with us as we get the actual presentation up.
While we wait, Mr. Moore, is there a reason we don't put any backup on the proposed budget information that we're gonna be going forward with the public?
We will be making available the actual budget document that is a part of this evening's exercise, so physical copies are to be distributed. However, we did forward copies to each of you electronically a little earlier this afternoon. That is the principal backup information.
Right.
But this is the kickoff, but otherwise, we will take that into consideration.
Okay, so that'll be made available then to the public, or?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
As a part of this exercise or the aftermath of this exercise, we will make arrangements for public outreach via online application, et cetera.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
ma'am, absolutely. Mr. Dunkley, if you would,
proceed.
please.
Yes, good afternoon again, Mayor Petrolia, members of the City Commission. We thank you for the opportunity to allow us to present to you the 2023-24 budget. During our presentation, essentially, we'll be going over the total citywide budget. We'll examine more closely some of the major funds, one of which is the general fund, which houses most of the city's major operations, as you're perhaps aware. The general fund houses such operations as fire, police, public works, parks and recreation, code enforcement, etc. We'll review the trends in the city's taxable value, which is a major factor in determining the amount of property revenue that is generated by the city. We'll also review the proposed millage rate, which also has a bearing on the total property tax revenue. We will then review the other funds of which, for the city, which are restricted as to purpose or which have donor-imposed or legally mandated restrictions, like the building fund or the grant funds. So the total citywide budget, or the actual proposed total citywide budget, as the city manager indicated, amounts to $329.8 million. 56% of this amount, or $184 million, is accounted for in the general fund. This is the city's chief operating fund. The total city budget increased by approximately 11% from the previous year, which is depicted by this chart, for reasons which I will later explain. So as we look at the different fund types, we have the general fund, the special revenue funds, enterprise, debt service, internal service, and so forth. And these individual fund types, as they're called, they are restricted in some way or fashion as compared to the general fund. And I'll go over the various restrictions a bit later. So when you look at the general fund, when you compartmentalize the general fund, what I'm going to do is go over the revenues, then I will go over the expenditures from two different angles. But before I even talk about the expenditures, if I may, I'll go over the revenues. So the total general fund revenues increased by about 9.2%. It's projected to increase for next year, that is. Taxes increased by $10 million, or 10%. The other sources represents usage of fund balance which we were directed to utilize as a result of reducing the millage rate and for other purposes, which I'll also explain. We had increases in utility taxes, $7.2 million to 7.8 roughly. Those were the main increases. The other sources are the fund balance usage, as I indicated. So in a nutshell, the bulk of the increase was reflected in the tax category. And the fines and forfeits, those were primarily increases in not only parking fees, fines, but the late fees associated with those fines. So when you look at the general fund revenues, as indicated earlier, the lion's share is in the way of taxes. $100 million of the taxes is for property taxes. Others are split between utility taxes, around $7 million. Then we have another $3 million for communication services taxes. Then we have other revenues such as the business tax receipts, which is around $1 million. In terms of the ad valorem tax revenue projections, from year to year, we have seen significant increases, not only in the taxable value of properties, but in terms of tax revenue generation. Just by way of comparison, if we take the first year that's on this table, which is 2014, and we look at the current year, or the upcoming year, which is 2024, there has been a 148% increase in the taxable value of property. So we're going from 2014 from $6.6 billion to 2024, $16.4 billion. So it's been a sizable increase in the city's taxable value. Likewise, the property tax revenue collections has increased significantly from 11 years ago. If we look at 2014, fiscal year that is, we generated $47.7 million in ad valorem tax revenue, and now we're estimating $100.5 million for the upcoming fiscal year. The proposed millage rate, over the years we have seen some decrease, which pretty much translates into some degree of relief for the taxpayers. If you look at it pictorially, we have seen a downward slope, which is how we hope for it to be, which not only we're seeing an increase in taxable values, but we're giving some relief to the taxpayers here. So if we look at the total increase in ad valorem taxes, which is $10 million, at first blush, one would say, well, wow, that's $10 million in additional revenue. However, if we look at the total increase in ad valorem taxes for the upcoming year, we'll be generating $100 million in ad valorem taxes. However, the other piece of the puzzle, or part of the equation, is that we have to distribute 21.4 million of that to the CRA, which gives the city a net of 79 million for which it could use for operations. So the general fund expenditures, what I will do is explain the increases in general fund expenditures from two angles. First, I'm going to explain the what, which is what's the type of expenses, operating, capital, personnel, services, debt service. Then I'll explain the who, which are the departments, which departments are contributing to the major increases in these various line items. So for personal services, We have health insurance costs budgeted for a 10% increase from $10 million to $11 million. We have an average wage salaries and wage increase of 4% budgeted. Pension costs rose moderately for all three plans. In terms of operating expenses, we had $1.5 million increase in vehicle rental charges, $500,000 increase in electricity, $543,000 increase in utility services for water irrigation, that's in the Parks Department, and $400,000 increase for the purchase of software. So that's the lion's share of the increase, as you've seen the up here in operating expenses of $3.5 million. We've had some offsetting decreases, but those represent the major increases that the city projects to face for the next year. In capital outlay, we have $563,000 for vehicle purchases and $840,000 for other machinery and equipment. And personal services account for the bulk of the expenses. So the various departments are depicted here. And in terms of the increases in the various departments, I'm not going to belabor you by chronicling one by one. The major departments are public safety, we have parks and recreation, and then public works, coupled in that order. For the police department, we had some capital outlay increases, 2 motorcycle purchases. We have some vehicle purchases, 3 in number. We have quite a few other increases in salaries and wages, other contractual services. And the bulk of the increase primarily was in garage rental fees. As I indicated earlier, and as the mayor specified in our previous workshop in June, we're trying to shore up the fleet fund such that we can reduce our reliance on borrowing to acquire our vehicles. And so that is the bulk of the increase in the police department. For the fire, we had increase in capital outlay of $333,000. Most of the increases in operating was in garage rental fees. It went from $581,000 to $1.2 million. And then we had purchase of protective gear from $177.5 thousand to $305,000. So those 2 departments, they're the largest department for most municipalities, and for us, those were the bulk of the increases there. For public works, we had increases primarily in the utility services electricity from $900,000 to $1.3 million. And for parks, we had increases in irrigation because we ourselves are water customers. So the irrigation line increased to a fair amount from roughly $600,000 to $947,000. Garage rental fees also increased, and that was the bulk of the increases for the major departments. I have indicated with respect to the other smaller departments. If you have any questions later, I can articulate why those increases occurred. In terms of the special revenue funds, these funds are specific to either uses where we have certain donor-imposed restrictions, such as with grants, the local option gas taxes, we can only use it on specified expenditures. The Neighborhood Services Fund, that covers the CDBG and the SHIP grants and so forth. These particular funds, they vary based upon funding availability from the federal, state, or local government, such as the county. The building fund, which is the first fund that's indicated there, is of course restricted by state statute as to what we can spend those funds on. So the enterprise funds, earlier this year, we enacted increases in some of our enterprise funds, which we have incorporated into the increases in the budget. The sanitation fund, there will be an increase of approximately $2 million, which represents contractual services for solid waste services, residential bulk pickup, we have residential garbage, recycling, and residential vegetation. So those were the bulk of the increases. We serve as a conduit, so to speak. For residential, we bill on behalf of the contractor, and the city retains an administrative fee for that. The water and sewer fund, even though there was a decrease in $1.7 million for capital outlay, there were some other increases, primarily for expenditures such as software purchases. Operating expenses increase, and the most dramatic increase is for the budget for chemicals. That was a sizable increase of roughly $1 million. Electricity went from 1.2 to 1.7 million. Other contractual services increased by roughly $400,000. In the water and sewer fund, we are essentially building up funds for the eventual payment of debt service for the new water treatment plant. And so the thing with that is that we have incorporated into the recent rate study the fact that we will be issuing debt in the very near future. So the rates and hence the increase in the water and sewer budget incorporates all of that. The stormwater fund, there's a sizable increase here of $7 million, and that is primarily for drainage improvements, as well as $2 million in seawall repairs. The internal service fund, the overall increase and I'm going to take this in reverse order, the insurance fund, the overall increase of around $3 million was primarily because of increases in health insurance claims. We went from 12.9 million to 13.9 million. Then we had increases of $600,000 for projected liability claims, an increase of 1.5 million for insurance package policy premium. And basically that is just all of the various lines of insurance for which we pay a premium. And the increase there was because of doubling of reinsurance costs, and we also experienced a significant increase in property insurance premiums for being a coastal city. The garage fund, moving back up to the top, consists of $4.8 million in fleet purchases, of which $3 million is for heavy fleet. That is ambulance, engine, VACCON, truck, boom trucks, and the like. And $1.8 million for the lighter fleet of vehicles. And I'm gonna kind of commit a cardinal sin, because I know I indicated earlier that our goal was to purchase all of our fleet outright. However, staff is in fact recommending that we lease purchase the heavy fleet, because that is typically the best approach because of the useful lives of the heavy fleet. It's significantly longer than the lighter fleet, and also it helps to not burden down the current generation of taxpayers with all of the purchases. So typically we would keep an engine for say 10, possibly 15 years in some cases, and that we can stretch out the purchase and not so much have such a significant cost, deplete all of our resources. And finally, the debt service fund, the only thing that I want to state here, because whenever we issue debt, we try to maintain what is called a level debt service. That is, from year to year, the debt service is pretty much the same. And that's why you see little to no increase here, because that is typically the design to make our debt service level. So what this means, though, is from a taxpayer standpoint, the impact to the average taxpayer for this year's debt, that is a general obligation debt, is $34. And the proverbial question has come up with, yeah, we just approved 2 issues of general obligation bonds, 2 different referenda. And the question is, well, what's the effect of those? And the Parks bond will have an effect of $22 to the average taxpayers.
Whoever has their phone on, please, if you could mute it, thank you. Sorry, please continue.
Yes, yeah, thanks, Mayor. So the Parks bond will have an effect of $22 per year to the average taxpayers. The public safety bond will be $107 per year impact to the average taxpayers. So what that is roughly $129,
Go ahead.
which after we've paid off the current series of general obligation bond, which we will be doing this year rather, it will equate to $95 to the average taxpayers. So what the residents have just approved will have a net effect of $95 on their annual taxes. And with that said, actually with the ARPA, and was an afterthought, I didn't introduce this in my agenda, but the ARPA, this represents our last year of usage of the ARPA fund. They gave us till 2024, December 31st, 2024, to fully expend, to obligate the funds, and we have to fully expend them by 2026. The only thing I wanted to point out was that staff is recommending the qualified infrastructure project that be used on stormwater improvements. That is a permissibly use, and we could use it on water, sewer, all different types of projects, but we felt that was perhaps the most, we would recommend that it be used on that specific, on those projects for stormwater type drainage improvements.
Is that what's remaining as a balance, the $956,000?
Correct, ma'am.
So we want to try to expend that? And
Correct.
will it be able to, if we're doing it on the stormwater, get done before the 2026 date?
Correct. Exactly.
Thank you.
And so with that said, I wanted to go over some next steps if the slide will advance. So what by law, which will be presented to you later on this evening, we have a tentative millage, which the property appraiser, we have 35 days within which to indicate to them what millage rates we would like to be placed on the trim notices. And that's what the agenda item later on this evening. August 15th, we will be having a follow-up workshop after you've had the opportunity to look at the actual budget document which we formally presented here and which is available on the website. We will have a possible follow-up August 15th workshop. September 5th and September 18th are the dates that are slated for the formal public hearing, when the public will have an opportunity to chime in with respect to our budget. Just want to point one thing out, that those 2 public hearings must begin after 5 p.m., as you perhaps already know. And I'm basically available for any questions that you might have.
Very good. Let's start with the guy across the world. Vice Mayor, do you have any comments or questions?
You know what? The only comment I have after going through the budget with our team members is in regards to a position that I had brought up to my colleagues, but also to Mr. Moore several times. Mr. Moore, would this be the appropriate time for me to bring that topic up?
Feel free, but I believe I introduced that during the introductory comments. Are you by any chance referring to the Director of Special Events?
Correct.
Yes, sir. The budget does include a recommendation to incorporate that feature.
That was just
Okay.
explained.
Okay. Then that was the only note that I had. So thank you, Mayor.
Very good.
And for transparency's sake, I did offer that commentary during my introductory remarks, so that's included along with a number of others.
Very good.
Thank you.
Deputy
Great.
Vice Mayor? Any comments or questions, concerns?
Just briefly wanted to ensure that the additional officer that I had referenced at the previous meeting was included in the budget. I assume it was based on the consensus. Just wanted to clarify.
That is correct, sir. Also part of my introductory remarks in general, but it is included to be more specific.
Perfect. Thank you. That's
You're
all I got.
welcome.
Very good, thank you. Commissioner Frankel?
Mr. Dunkley, thank you very much. I appreciate you setting out in all the slides, you know, detailed numbers, detailed steps, everything. So the PowerPoint, it was very, very helpful. Thank you.
Likewise, thanks much.
Thank you. Commissioner Burns?
Yes, thank you. Ditto, the slides were very helpful, but I wanted to get a clarification on the heavy fleet purchases. Did you say that we wanted, was it recommended to buy them outright or lease?
Please.
To lease. Those typically have a 2-year lead time on bill, and so we find that it was best that it be leased. Those are typically significant in terms of costs. Some range up to $1.3 million, and we try to spread the costs out over a period of years.
And just to add to that, Commissioner Burns and Mr. Dunkley, what we're specifically referring to are your large-scale fire apparatuses, for example. Number one. Number two, the city of Delray Beach, for the record, does have a history of engaging in the acquisition of these types of fleet via that approach, the lease purchase. There was a discussion during the last year process relative to smaller transactions on a lease purchase basis, and we adhered to the direction as offered at that time to not do that. So when we're referring to police vehicles and other daily type capital expenditures in that, we're looking at a straight purchase approach in that regard. The lease purchase program, again, we're talking about very specific, very large scale pieces of equipment such as fire apparatus is probably the best example to give for purposes of this dialogue. That is what we mean.
That's what I needed clarity on.
Yes, ma'am.
And just one other question, the debt service included the $34, the parks, public bond comes to $163, but once the bond is paid off, it reduces to $95 per
Correct.
average.
Okay, I had a question also about the lease purchase of the heavy fleet and equipment. How have we done that in the past? Has it been a purchase outright? Because I kind of remember that when we purchased a fire apparatus, we purchased it outright in the past.
You've done both.
We've done both. Where do we rent? Where do we lease a vehicle? What was the lease, the most recent one?
The most recent lease purchase, Mr. Dunkley, I'll defer to you in that regard. That would have gone back a few years
we
or
could
so.
look back, but I believe it was a couple of years ago, and we're recommending that. Typically, what happens when we could always purchase cash or cash fund the purchase. The only thing with that, as we accumulate the funds, we have a few things against us: inflation, and then we have increased maintenance and repair costs, in which we're faced with now. Some of our fleet, and I'm not sure if the
Madam Mayor?
department director.
just to add to that, when we were in the process of evaluating fleet considerations for the upcoming fiscal year, part of our analysis did take under consideration any recent history of lease purchase transactions, and there had been a couple. You've participated in both. So what I'd like to do in the next day is give the City Commission a history of what that looks like. So what we can do over the last 5, 6, 7 years or so, give you a history of what large-scale pieces of equipment acquisitions have been made. We'll offer a summary as to what was purchased outright, what was lease purchase. It's a mix. So I'll give you that specific information over the next day or so. We'll forward an email to you all accordingly.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you.
Anything else? Seeing no one, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yes, ma'am. There's more updates. We do have 2 other brief presentations.
Okay.
One summarizing the capital improvement program, if you will, and followed by the Urban Development Action Grant.
Correct.
Those presentations will be fairly succinct and brief.
Yep.
And as I articulated in a recent information letter report, the capital improvement program focuses primarily centered on the general obligation bond issued projects. However, we are obligated to offer a 5-year projection in terms of where we are, but this is a fairly succinct presentation followed by the Q&A relative to UDAG.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dunkley, appreciate that. I didn't mention that, so I just wanted to thank you because I didn't realize you were leaving the front here. Go right
Thank you,
ahead.
ma'am. Missy Barletto, if you would, please.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. You'll find in front of you the hot off the press draft copy of the city's capital improvement program budget. The one thing I can guarantee you is that there are mistakes in it.
Okay.
So, just so that you know that this is a work in progress. So I'm going to give you a very high level overview of it this afternoon so that you have a chance to take a look at it and come back with questions. So every year I bring to you the total CIP budget by department. As you can see, our total budget this year is just over $108 million. Of that, the lion's share goes toward the construction of public infrastructure, roadway projects, stormwater projects, those types of things, and that would be housed in the Public Works Department. Coming in right after us is the Utilities Department as they embark on the planning for their new water treatment plant, and then Parks and Recreation and Development Services. In this year's budget, you'll see a few new funds that have not been included in the CIP program in the past. The first of those is Fund 119, which is the beautification fund, of which $100,000 is provided annually. That will be utilized this year by the Parks and Recreation Department for contracts to work on maintenance of our roadway medians and rights of way. Fund 125 represents the building fund that's been created. This year we're going to begin looking at the renovation of our city hall to provide for appropriate workspace for existing employees and to plan into the future to be able to provide space. We have looked at the space available here at City Hall. We feel like with some interior renovations and changes, we can make this an adequate and exceptional workspace for our workforce. And we'll begin on that process this year, looking at providing maybe $2 million into that process from the building fund, which will go toward the renovation of the north end of City Hall. And as we're doing that, we'll start looking at the rest of City Hall to build those renovations in. And then the 2 brand new funds that are a result of last year's election and passing of the Recreation Government Obligation Bond, will be using $5.5 million of the $20 million that was passed by the voters to do a variety of improvements in our Parks and Recreation arena, doing public restrooms, tennis stadium enhancements, athletic field lighting, beach access improvements. We're looking at the beach master plan showers and fountains and putting in place a maintenance program for those so that those will be replaced on a regular basis. The main pavilion that is at Atlantic and A1A has some structural repairs that need to be accomplished in the coming year in order to make that, to safe that facility up. And then looking at locker room renovations at the tennis center. We're also looking to repair the Hilltopper and the Miller Park elevators that have been out of service for quite some time. In the public safety government obligation bond, of which the voters passed $100 million, this year we're going to be embarking on the space needs analysis and planning and design for the new police department headquarters, as well as looking at the Fire Station 112 replacement and working on the Ocean Rescue locker room and some storage improvements for the Ocean Rescue facility at Anchor Park. Some of the budget highlights that you'll see in the document that you've been provided this evening are the new water treatment plan, which is very exciting. Our Fire Station 3 replacement, the fire station has been demolished. We're ready to start building it back up. We'll be bringing you more information about that in the next 2 months. Parking technology improvements, which I'll be giving you a presentation about some of the things that we're planning for that later on this evening under the city manager's comments. In the realm of maintenance, which several of you have asked us to pay specific attention to, the replacement of personal computers for city employees has been something that's been neglected over the last several years. We'll be putting in place an annual allotment for replacing the personal computers for city employees. Air conditioner replacements have a very large piece of the budget this year. In the renovations at the Crest Theater, there are just about 50 air conditioner units at the Crest Theater. Just about half of those are not in good working order and either need to be replaced or have significant repairs. All of that is being accommodated in the upcoming budget. There is an interlocal agreement between the city and the city of Boynton Beach to do streetscape improvements on Gulfstream Boulevard. As most of you know, we share that roadway. The city has the eastbound traffic side of the road, and Boynton Beach has the westbound side. So we're working together to improve that roadway and bring it up to our standards. Andrews Avenue safety improvements will continue, that we're looking at just from Vista Del Mar to Atlantic Avenue for those safety improvements. The recently discussed historic grants and grant applications in the study for the historic designation for the municipal golf course has placeholders in the budget for this coming year. We will be completing the historic train depot office build out. In the stormwater area, we'll be doing the Thomas Street pump station construction, Marineway seawall roadway and drainage improvements, and seawall replacements. At the cemetery, we're looking at constructing a new mausoleum. As you know, many of the available spaces at the cemetery have dwindled. We're almost at capacity there. The mausoleum will greatly increase our ability to provide that service. And then it does not show up in this year's budget specifically, but in the following year, as a city, we have received a positive, what the Corps of Engineers calls a PIR, a project implementation report for storm repairs to our beach. Our next beach renourishment project had been put out till 2028 or 2029. the Corps of Engineers is now looking at doing a storm repair project on our beach in fiscal year 2026. That will be at full federal expense. The city, the only expense to the city will be if we put advanced sand onto the beach to prevent the earlier need for a new beach renourishment project. Oh, there we go. And with that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
All right, we'll start again with the Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Missy. I don't think I've ever seen such a large capital improvement budget list for not 1 year, but obviously in one presentation. Not today, but in the near future. I would like to know more about our strategy for being able to tackle all of these projects. What we'll be doing internally, how we'll be looking for help externally. Again, not something that I would expect today, but sometime in the near future, if we could have a workshop or a presentation on that, because I'd like to understand more about how we are going to make all of this happen. Because again, it is it's an impressive list, and I'm glad we're prioritizing all this, but it's a big lift.
If I may, Madam Mayor, to your point, Vice Mayor Boylston, that is actually the direction upon the authorization of the fiscal year 2023-2024 budget. In the early part of the fiscal year, we will be offering a summary publicly via what the strategies will be to accomplish this rather assertive capital improvement program. So that will be forthcoming, and we'll be happy to offer accordingly.
Okay, great. And I can't stress enough the line item for the GEO bond on our parks public restrooms. Missy, I want to win awards for our public restrooms. I want to go from where we are today to award-winning public restrooms citywide. That's my expectation on that one.
Okay, I'll start looking for an award program for bathrooms.
It'll come. If you build it, the awards will come.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Missy.
Thank you. All right, so Commissioner Burns, anything?
Yes, I have a question.
Sure.
I know that, there's a big renovation plan for Pompey Park for the structure. However, the concession stand press box is falling apart. And they also have an elevator that's been out of service for a number of years. Are any of these funds in this bond being set aside to make renovations for the press box and concession stand at Pompey Park?
At this point in time, we do not have plans for doing more than a good job of sprucing it up and getting the elevator back into operational order. It is on our horizon for a requirement, but I will tell you that at this point in time, we do not have plans to address that. Specific designs and a timeline and schedule is what I mean when I say that. So we do not have a specific schedule for when that will be completed, but it is on the list of projects that need to be done.
It's on the list of projects, so is it safe to say that it will not be included in the 2023-24 budget?
Yes, ma'am. We will be beginning on the Pompey Park renovations by building the new community center there. During that time, the old community center will stay in service. Once that has been completed, once the new community service center has been built, then we will demolish the old community center and start to work on the ball fields and the grounds. That's an 18-month to 2-year project. Once that's completed, then we'll be looking at bringing in the concession stand also.
Okay,
Anything else?
that'll be it.
Okay, Commissioner Franco?
Missy, I have one question. First, thank you for the presentation. But since this is my last budget, my last opportunity to ask, how's the elevator at Feddersfield Garage?
It's operational, sir.
Good, so it doesn't have to be in there. Perfect. Thank you.
There you go. Deputy Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Missy. No, just great presentation and very ambitious list of stuff here, and I look forward to the follow-up meetings to come up with strategies, get it all done.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm just kind of perusing through the book that we just received of the CIP projects that are coming in. I think that there's gonna probably be more discussion, hopefully, on this. $115,000 for portable bathrooms, not so sure that that's really a great way to spend the money. I know that we do have some money that came in from our bonds, but I think that there's other things that we could possibly be doing in lieu of that. It's a big ticket item considering. Building renovations of City Hall North End, $2 million. I mean, this place needs to just be redone. It's hard to kind of stomach that when I understand that we need to redo the space, but that just seems like an awfully large ticket item considering this, we need to really be looking at, in the not so distant future, changing this whole building. It just makes total sense. The $20 million that came from the CRA from the Pompey Park budget. That's correct. Okay. And then Andrews Avenue. It looks like you're doing safety improvements. I'm hoping that you took into consideration what I think the commission talked about with respect to not all the way to George Bush Boulevard. That section that basically is from Vista Del Mar to Atlantic is the
Yes,
real.
ma'am. That is the only section that's under
Great,
consideration.
because I know that we'll get a lot of pushback otherwise, and I don't know that there's a heavy traffic other than like when we have a big event like, 4th of July and things like that, where you're gonna get that anyway. The lift station generators in here, that is not the ones on the wheels that's being shown. That's an actual generator that's for these lift stations. Is that correct? I ask that because the pictures on wheels, and we've got a lot of wheeled generators, maybe not to the capacity that could be used, but I'm just questioning that it's a big ticket item, and I know we have over 100 generators, in our lot, and I'm just curious as to whether or not it's a permanent generator, right? I mean, maybe the permanent ones are on wheels. I don't know.
Utilities Director Hassan
There you go.
Hajimari is
Very
coming up
good.
to
Thank you.
address that.
Good afternoon.
Yep.
Yes. Yes, those are for the permanent generator, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, it said that
Not
it
for
ran
the
out of its
wheel.
life expectancy, so we're not buying something that's temporary, we're buying a permanent for the
Permanent generator,
replacement.
correct.
That's
Yes.
all I need to know.
Thank you.
Medians, we've got a lot of money for medians. I was surprised that my colleague, Ms. Burns, did not mention it first. But my expectation is, and I hope that the rest of the commission's expectation is that those medians are really put into great shape. Looks like we've got some irrigation going into the medians, probably didn't have that before in some of them, and obviously they are in desperate need of being spruced up. So that would be great if we can make sure that that happens, and our city is seamless with some of our other, one of our other bordering cities. You can tell the difference when you're coming here, and that is upsetting. And then I saw that there were 3 larger vehicles, fire truck, rescue truck, and the sweeper. Are all of those going to be purchased, Mr. Moore, on the lease?
The recommendation is to proceed with the lease purchase package in
Okay.
those regards. Those are the 3 in response to Commissioner Burns' question. Yes, ma'am.
Very good. That's all the questions that I had and comments, and if there's anything else? No? All right,
Just
so we're
was
gonna,
glad to see it on there, that's all.
yep, absolutely. Thank you very much, Missy. Great presentation,
Thank
and I
you.
think we've got one more for the UDAG.
One more brief UDAG, and we have Mr. Sam Walthour, Director of Neighborhood and Community Service, and members of his team. This is actually very brief. We will simply summarize the update we received from the United States Department of Housing and
Great.
Urban Development relative to capabilities, as well as a potential alternative consideration given thoughts relative to land acquisition, et cetera. Mr. Walthour, if you would please
Thank you,
succinctly.
Thank you, Mr. Moore, Madam Mayor, members of the commission, Sam Walthour, Neighborhood and Community Services. As promised, we came back to share with you the summary of our research with U.S. HUD regarding strategy of land acquisition for the use of UDAG funds. And staff did extensive research with US HUD, identified in a memo that we shared several references. Bottom line, the funds cannot be used for land acquisition. However, we are the steward of the Workforce Housing Fund, and there's a land acquisition strategy within that fund. And we are anticipating in the upcoming fiscal year a total of $1.63 million to come into that fund. And that's based on 2 allocations from Atlantic Crossings and 1 from Alexa and Del Rey. So there will be dollars that the commission, if it so wishes, could allocate into the land acquisition strategy of $1.6 million if you'd like to do that. That money will be available within the next fiscal year.
What was the fund again? I'm sorry.
The Workforce Housing
Thank
Fund.
you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And we have complete control over that?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Absolutely.
Very good. Any questions? I think that answers the question that we had.
Okay.
Vice Mayor, anything? Nope. Okay.
Talking, but I think.
Yeah, I think he said no.
You're muted, okay.
I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think that pretty much does it. We finished with the,
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very
Budget
much, ladies and
workshop
gentlemen. We look
portion
forward
of
to the
our
continuation.
very good. So I'm gonna go ahead and end this meeting, and it's gonna take us a few minutes to go ahead and get started on the next meeting.